conversion of Constantine in the early 4th century AD, Christianity held a strong appeal to certain groups in Roman society and held virtually no appeal to other groups in Roman society. Groups whose members were alienated in some respect from Roman traditions, who could not participate fully in the political or the cultural life of the Roman Empire, these groups and their members are going to become Christian in disproportionately large numbers. Groups of people who benefited a great deal from the Roman Empire, who were able to participate fully at a political and cultural level, these groups are not going to convert to Christianity in any great numbers. Within the Roman Empire, before the conversion of Constantine, Roman senators, for example, will very rarely become converts to Christianity. And peasants in the countryside also rarely become Christians, although in that case it's simply because they are so inaccessible and so spread out throughout the countryside that missionaries have not yet had a chance to introduce them to Christianity. But the better off you were in the Roman Empire, the less likely it was you were going to become a Christian. As to those who do convert, well, they are substantially urban dwellers, people who live in cities. And Christianity is an urban religion during the first few centuries of its existence. But even within cities whose vast size and whose anonymity drove certain individuals to embrace Christianity and to identify themselves with this new religion, even in these cities, some groups of people tended to become Christian more often than others. Women certainly are disproportionately represented in the earliest Christian congregations. Slaves and freed slaves, who are not numerically all that significant in the Roman Empire, but do figure quite prominently in early Christian circles. They are freed individuals, but they have a very ambiguous status because they still bear the taint of their past servitude. They are not wholly accepted either by slaves or by the free population, and so they find a home for themselves, an identity for themselves in Christianity. Another group that provided a large number of early Christian converts would be immigrants, people who moved from one part of the empire to another, who found themselves in a place where they didn't understand the local language very well, they didn't have many friends or many relatives. They often tend to become Christian as well. As for why these groups, members of these groups, tend to become Christian, well, part of it has to do with the form in which the Christian message is presented in the Gospels. It is very accessible. It is presented not in the form of a difficult philosophical discourse that only someone with a very advanced education can follow. It is taught in the form of parables that people can understand. Not a few Roman intellectuals of the 2nd and 3rd centuries turned up their noses at Christianity when they saw the lowbrow Greek in which the Gospels were written. Christianity pays little attention to the social distinctions that existed within the Roman Empire, and spiritually, Christianity maintains that these social distinctions do not matter at all. That slaves, freed slaves, senators, all of them are equal in the eyes of God. All of them can be saved. To Romans, the notion that a senator is spiritually equal to a slave, in some sense, is a repugnant notion. And the values espoused by Christianity were also values that were more easily embraced by those lower down on the social scale. Roman paganism saw love of honor as a positive good in society. You should want people to admire you, and you should lavish lots and lots of money on building aqueducts for your hometown or holding circus games, and you should stamp your name in huge letters on the bath that you built with an inscription extolling your own magnificence and generosity, because love of honor, that's what leads people to do good things in the world. For Christians, love of honor, this is pride, and instead humility is a virtue. In a sense, Christianity upends the Roman scale of values. Those who had the money to build lavish baths for their hometowns tended not to admire a religion that saw humility as a virtue. And another example of Christian values being the opposite of pagan ones concerns wealth and poverty. Romans ascribed no moral value to poverty. Being poor does not opportunities for spiritual enrichment for you. Being poor means you're poor and that you're miserable, and that the best you can do is hope that some generous benefactor will hold circus games in your hometown to entertain you. For Christians, poverty is a spiritual benefit, that riches are a temptation that will interfere with your chances for salvation in the next world, and therefore being poor is the better state in which to exist. What Christianity most offered, though, to the immigrants, to the women, to the slaves, to the freed slaves, to the town dwellers who make up the Christian congregations of the first 3 centuries, is a strong sense of community, a sense of belonging to a small group of highly devoted individuals and highly committed individuals, and a sense of belonging to a tightly knit network of churches that helped out one another. The sense of community, of tightly knit local community, and then this somewhat more widespread community throughout the empire, is not an abstraction, it's very tangible. And pagan commentators often remarked upon it in the various forms it took. Local Christian churches looked out for their own. They looked out for widows, and they looked out for orphans, and they took care of the poorer members of their congregations. When you heard in Corinth that a Christian church had been burned down hundreds of miles away, that people needed help, or that Christians had been captured by the goths and needed to be ransomed, you helped. You were responsible for all of these other communities, and those who could not find an identity really in the Roman world could find it in Christianity. They could find a place where they could participate actively.